object-oriented programming concept. So, which is cloning, recursion, and call by value, call by reference. Let me open this. So cloning. So as you know, that word clone says like duplicate, right? So you can clone object. So we can make a duplicate copy of object using this object cloning option. So object cloning is basically is simple to understand. Like we can create an extra copy of an object, that is called cloning. So for this, the advantage of cloning is less basically the process. Like when you try to make an extra copy, so you don't need to like go through multiple process. Like inside the JVM it will be helpful, without if you're trying to create new object, what happens, it actually when you try to create new object, let's say your employee new object you are creating, when you try to create new object, so inside the JVM, it actually scan entire class, and it will read the properties, and based on these properties only it will actually create the class, the object. But when you try to clone it, so it inside the JVM, like internally, doesn't need to use much process. It will simply whatever is already there inside, like this object, it will just clone it. So for internal purpose, it is basically very easy if you use the clone instead of creating like making new object. So for this purpose, the clone method is basically used. So there is a clone method. So I'll show you with example. Suppose let's say here one subject class is there. Subject class, there is a student also, like is the subject and student both are there. So student has class has one more object reference. This is called object reference. So there is a, so string is there, variable, and as well as object variable is also there, object reference also there, which is subject. Like that means here the subject is student contains subject object. Okay, here. So now when you're trying to make this student class object, so student stud equal to student. So using parameters constructor, we can create the object. So when you say student dot clone here, if you look at right, student dot clone method is this, which actually makes extra copy, duplicate copy of that. So then here, whatever already student has, like John, student name, and then algebra subject. So what happens, it will just create an extra copy with the same values whatever there. So that's called cloning. I'll run this with practice, with one of the practice program. So that's about cloning. So there is a clone method basically we have to use, and we have to implement clonable interface also. If you want to clone any object, that class should be implements clonable. This is a standard we have to follow, Java standards. So this clonable is one of the interface, so which JVM actually knows that okay, there will be a possibility that the student class can be, a student object can be closed, and that is why we have to implement the clonable. So, and if you don't implement clonable interface, clone method generates some class not support exception. So why use clone method? What is the purpose of? The clone method saves extra processing task for creating the copy of an object. So it saves a lot of processing time, processing task for internal JVM. If you perform, it may use, if you perform using new keyword, so it will take a lot of process to be performed. That is why we use the Java cloning option. So there are two types in cloning: shallow cloning and deep cloning. So shallow cloning, nothing but what it has. So when you have an object, right, in main object, when you have one of the another object. So what it like when you make a copy, right? So from source to target. So in this example, uh, the student class has subject is one of the object. Okay, subject student class as one of the reference object, and then when you try to clone it, okay, when you try to clone that student object, what happens here? So the student, whatever the subject object it has, like so it will refer the same object, it will refer both source and destination. Here in this case, the student is the source and here is the clone is destination. So both will have the same subject object. It refers both source and target, same contained object. But deep copy, what it does, when you try to clone it, like if it has contained object any class, it will actually create one new contained object, and it will actually create separate copy even for the, like entire new extra copy what you are creating. But here both source and destination refers to the same contained object one only. Here what happens for reference object or contained object, it will create separate, like object, and it will both will be separate. That's about deep and shallow cloning difference. Do you understand the concept what is cloning? Before I go and run the program, do you understand it? What is cloning? Any questions?
Hey, Chandra,
Yeah.
that when you do deep cloning, would that increase your overhead?
No, it will not increase the overhead, right? It will here also. Suppose if you want to make a new copy, so here, so if you don't use the cloning, it will basically have to create a new this one, as well as, like this one new keyword, new objects it has to create, and it will basically, like with the cloning, right? It doesn't create two new objects. It will just make a copy of these two. Deep cloning.
No, I'm just trying to compare the shallow copy and the deep one. Like in shallow, you point to the same place, correct? But
Correct.
in the deep, it makes like you have to point to different places, to different memory locations.
No, here also you have to make main object one, main object two, right? So here also two separate objects. Here these two only this contained object difference. Here also two separate objects. So only contained object only difference. Okay, so this entire process we are not making any new keyword actually. Okay, so we are just using clone method. Clone method we internally saves lot of like processing time. So in this case, what we are doing, we are creating two new objects. Okay, two new objects, but in this case only one object it will create, and whatever the existing it will refer. So yeah,
So, what is the objective of making shallow or deep?
it depends on the requirement. Okay, if you have requirement to, like separate completely, it depends on the project requirement. If project requirement has, like separate, okay, contained object, then we can use the deep cloning. If the requirement, okay, let it refer same object, okay, both source and target, then we can use the shallow cloning.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, you and Salem, do you understand what is object cloning?
Uh, Chandra, now, for example, we got cloning.
Mm.
Now we learn in JavaScript, clone means to just to get the URL of one project.
No, not
That process is cloning, right?
cloning is nothing but, like you are actually, suppose, let's say if you have an object, like let's take on bicycle is there, okay, on bicycle, if you want to clone the bicycle, what you do is in 3D or something. So what you do, you can just like create the same kind of bicycle object, exact same as new one, right? Same copy, extra copy. Okay, here also the same thing. Like if we have any student class, if we have, and if we make object from the class, okay, and that object if you want to clone, right? What you can do, you can just apply clone method. That's it. You're just creating some duplicate copy.
Like the sheep. What's her name? We clone the sheep. What's her
Yeah.
name? Dolly, right?
Totally okay.
What's
Yeah.
The one they clone her. They copy
Yeah.
her DNA and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
What's her name? The famous sheep.
Sheep.
Dolly, you're right.
Dolly, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a clone.
Yeah, it is.
They clone her, her DNA and everything.
Yeah.
So Dolly, yeah.
Yeah, this is a kind of clone. Yeah, the same DNA cloning. Yeah. So here also the exact copy you are maintaining. While making copy, if it has some if it has some shade objects, so then those shade objects will separate completely. That's called deep copy. Let me run this program, okay? So then you can understand. So let's first go with the student, like the simple, like
So why we cloning?
yeah, this is the okay. It saves a lot of extra processing task for creating. If you don't clone, let me answer that question, okay? So let me run the program first. Okay, let's assume that there is a class called student. There might be. Okay, there is a student class. Let's assume that there are like student name and okay. So we have a student class created. So now what we do for creating object, we will need to create main method. Okay, here. So for creating a new object, what we do, we basically student one, and with the new keyword we create, right, with the new keyword, and then set the data. Set the data like student number and student name. We set the data. Student number is 1, and the student name is John. Okay, if we have this, so this is the way to create new object. Do you agree? You. This is the way to create new object. Hello, you are there?
So student.
So what we do, right? So we basically create with a new keyword any object that right? New keyword, and we can set the data like after that. So now for cloning, right? What you can do simply, like if you want to make, let's say I want to make some hundreds of duplicate objects of this. Okay, what you can do simply, but you have to implement. If you want to make cloning, what you have to do, you have to implement clonable object. npm implements MENTS. Clonable. So we can implement clonable interface, and then let's say if you want to create like some 10 objects, duplicate objects, what you can do simply student stud to equal, okay, I can use all whatever created already, stud1, okay, dot clone. So there is a student stud1 dot so student the dark format is not showing up. Did I miss anything here? Is correct. stud1 is correct object. It is not showing clearly. Cannot do object or object includes coding. So there's something. Did I use this program earlier or this project? No. Let me directory and is correct only. Let me check. I think this is the workspace I used long time back. The meeting is ending in 1 minute. If it ends, I'll send the new one.